Mark Twain once said, "In the beginning of a change, the patriot is a scarce man, and brave, and hated, and scorned. When his cause succeeds, the timid join him, for then it costs nothing to be a patriot." A little book published in 1928 titled Propaganda by Edward Bernays has been at work since then. He was and is known as the father of modern propaganda and public relations. He married social science with psychological manipulation. Remember, all propaganda is information, but not all information is propaganda.
The Gore prescription plan, bureaucrats decide. The Bush prescription plan, seniors choose.
Vance Packer's book, The Hidden Persuaders, explains it all in 1957.
The Gore prescription plan, bureaucrats decide. The Bush prescription...
Want the truth? You can't handle the truth. You have that luxury. You have the luxury of not knowing what I know. You don't want the truth because deep down in places you don't talk about at parties, you want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. We use words like honor, code, loyalty. We use these words as the backbone of a life spent defending something. You use them as a punchline.
Now let us connect the dots.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan.
The first week in October, less than 30 days after 9/11, to have a sustained bombing campaign in Afghanistan in this time frame would mean the United States of America had to have the war materiel pre-positioned for logistic support. This would mean the Afghanistan war was preordained to happen before 9/11. The general continues.
And I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Probably the best known builder, particularly of great buildings in the city. There's a great deal of question about whether or not the damage and the ultimate destruction of the buildings was caused by the airplanes, by architectural defect, or possibly by bombs or aftershocks. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it was an architectural defect. You know, the World Trade Center was always known as a very, very strong building. Don't forget, that took a big bomb in the basement. Now, the basement is the most vulnerable place because that's your foundation. And it withstood that. And I got to see that area about 3 or 4 days after it took place because one of my structural engineers actually took me for a tour because he did the building. And I said, "I can't believe it. The building was standing solid and half of the columns were blown out." I mean, so I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall.
You know, Donald, we were looking at pictures all morning long of that plane coming into building number 2, and when you see that approach the far side, and then all of a sudden, within a matter of a millisecond, the explosion pops out the other side.
Right. I just think that it was a plane with more than just fuel. I think it just seemed to me that to do that kind of destruction is even more than a big plane, because you're talking about taking out steel, the heaviest caliber steel that was used on a building. I mean, these buildings were rock solid, and it's just an amazing thing. This country is different today, and it's going to be different than it ever was for many years to come.
Very profound statement and very true.
Now let's listen to Trump a couple days later. Why the change?
A lot of people ask, how is it possible that a Boeing plane would be able to destroy or two planes would be able to destroy the Twin Towers? Because they were constructed to withstand like a 707 attack.
Well, it's tremendous power and tremendous heat, tremendous amounts of fuel that was dumped on the building, and 1,600 degrees temperature. I guess that's probably more than anything could take.
Now listen to this freelancer from Fox. Freelancer, what does that mean? Does it mean actor? This is the Fox News kickoff to the public indoctrination, covering all the salient points as told by an eyewitness. He provided the detailed analysis as to planes crashing into buildings, coupled with engineering analysis as to why the buildings collapsed, and also introduced the term ground zero. Act 1, Scene 2.
Down. We want to bring in Mark Walsh, who's a freelancer for Fox. You live just a few blocks away and witnessed.
Dude, I live on the 43rd floor of a building which is 5 blocks from the World Trade Center itself. I witnessed the entire thing from beginning to end.
People talk about how it looked like a movie. I know when I came walking down here early this morning and saw both towers on fire and people on every street corner, it was like a movie. But you watched the planes hit the towers.
I was watching with my roommate. It was approximately several minutes after the first plane had hit. I saw this plane come out of nowhere and just ream right into the side of the Twin Tower, exploding through the other side. And then I witnessed both towers collapse, one first and then the second, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was just too intense.
Obviously, there were a lot of people inside the buildings at the time.
Two guys from the 7th Precinct, the 1st Precinct, the fire department right here, the 7th truck, those guys are all right there at ground zero when those things went down. And God bless, I know there's a lot of guys there that were around there, and hopefully they made it out.
What was happening around you, in the streets around you, as this was all going down?
Absolute pandemonium. From my viewpoint up 43 floors, I could see people running like ants, just absolutely scurrying for their lives. Billows of smoke coming through the streets, just walking down the street, just pushing everybody back. And then several minutes after, it looked like it had just snowed over the entire area.
Yeah, the debris, the soot was thick on the street.
This is not soot. This is vaporized steel.
I'm hearing a lot of similar stories from people who were inside the building. One gentleman we spoke to earlier today, John, was on the 77th floor and said it was a relatively orderly evacuation at that point after the first plane hit the first tower. Everyone going down the stairs, not a lot of panic. But when they got to the 6th floor, he says they felt a second shake. And then people started to really be concerned. There were police officers there and emergency crews there when this was all happening, and they were right at ground zero when it all went down. So can we talk to you? What's your role out here right now?
I'm just standing by right now. Can't say what role I'm playing right now.
Well, there's a lot of standing by. There's also concern that some of these other buildings might actually come down. This building right here with the glass that you see, the nearest tall building, that has structural damage as well. We saw a lot of glass broken out, and a corner of the building appeared to be in distress, and there's concern that there might actually be another collapse of that building.
We will now hear from Al Franken reading from his 2003 book.
6 months after 9/11, the Gallup poll of Islamic countries found that an overwhelming majority of those surveyed believed the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon had not been the work of Arabs. Well-educated Egyptians and Saudis believed that the Israelis were behind the murder of 3,000 innocents on 9/11, in large part because of articles in their country's official state newspapers. One of the widely disseminated stories was that no Jews died in the collapse of the trade towers because they had received calls telling them not to go to work that day.
Odigo, the instant messaging service, says that 2 of the workers received messages 2 hours before the Twin Towers attack on September 11, predicting the attack would happen, and the company has been cooperating with Israeli and American law enforcement, including the FBI, in trying to find the original sender of the messages predicting the attack.
To tell you the truth, I got the Jew call. I had an office in the Trade Center where I used to do most of my writing. The call came from former New York Mayor Ed Koch. Al, he told me, don't go to work on the 23rd day of Elul.
The 23rd day of Elul is September 11th, 2001.
Actually, I watched the events of that awful day from Minneapolis, where I was visiting my mom.
You are now going to hear Larry Silverstein deliver a speech in 2003 in Israel talking about a new Building 7 at the World Trade Center. He is telling his audience, and now us, he had building plans drawn before new Building 7 in the spring of 2000. Yes, complete plans for a new Building 7 in 2000. How long ago was this planned? If he had complete construction plans in 2000 and started construction in 2002. Special bonus with the low-interest 9/11 Liberty Bond government financing program. Nice if you can get it, and old Larry got it, pocketed billions.
A football field. There were now only 42,000 feet. And the building is going to contain not 2 million feet, but 1.7 million. And that's one of the sacrifices we have to make. I said, let's make it and let's get on with it. And so, next thing you know, we've got the designs of the building. And the first design meeting was in April of 2000. And construction began shortly thereafter in 2002. And we went to finance the building with Liberty bonds, construction bonds from the Liberty Bond program that was initiated by the federal government to enable us to rebuild the Trade Center. But it still required insurance company bonds, insurance company payments under the policies. And so, next thing you know, this building was under full construction.
Pull it. Yes, make way for the new Building 7.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Trump Tower, 2003.
Good morning. Welcome to Trump Tower. It's an honor to have all of you with us. If we rebuild the World Trade Center in the form of a skeleton, Freedom Tower, the terrorists win. We want to rebuild the World Trade Center as the World Trade Center, but better. A little bit taller, a lot stronger, just plain better.
What I want to see built is the World Trade Center stronger and maybe a story taller. And that's what everybody wants.
Speaking as an out-of-towner, every time I fly over Manhattan, I see basically an amputated battery area. The bottom of the island looks amputated. I see the missing towers. Is that a better monument than the Freedom Towers just not having anything, or would you rather have the World Trade Towers back?
I'd rather have nothing than what they're building, Chris. It's a terrible design.
What role are you going to take? I mean, you're not a sidewalk superintendent. You're Donald Trump. I mean, what role? Will you lead a coalition to stop Governor Pataki from his strong support for the Freedom Tower?
Well, there's not much of a role I can take. It all started when the New York Post called me and asked my opinion. And I'm the biggest developer in New York by far. I've done just about, I guess, everything you can do in the world of real estate. And I see what's happening down there. It's a mess. And the developer is actually a friend of mine, but he didn't want to build this building either. If you look back at the records, I mean, when it was first foisted upon him, Larry Silverstein is a great guy. He's a good guy. He's a friend of mine. But he didn't want to build this pile of junk. And it's a shame. It's
of a building. And the first design meeting was in April of 2000. And construction began shortly thereafter in 2002.
President Trump, in light of what was just reviewed, I will assume your story changed for love of the country. It is now time for a real 9/11 investigation. It is time to have your FBI and DOJ meet with your friend Larry and ex-Senator Al Franken, along with the Bushes, Cheney, Wolfowitz, 2000 PNAC report members, FBI, CIA, etc. Should you fail to do this, there should be a movement to impeach you for dereliction of duty, a high crime. I am a Trump supporter and also want to make America great again. Let freedom ring for the world.